Hello, I'm Jen Leasure with the Quilt, and I'm here to introduce the NRP Pilot Testbed Panel. You heard Larry mention this effort earlier, and this panel is comprised of individuals and representing organizations that are participating and leading the pilot testbed. So I'd like to do a quick round of introductions, and then as you can see, we have a large number of panelists here, so we'll work our way through the different perspectives. First, I'd like to introduce to you Akbar Kara, who is the CTO of Learn, a regional network in Texas. We have John Moore from Internet2, Associate Vice President of Research and Infrastructure Strategy. Lewis Fox, CEO and President of Scenic. James Deaton, Executive Director for the Great Plains Network. Wendy Huntoon, CEO and President of Kimber. Bill Owens, CTO for NYSERDET, the New York State Research and Education Network. And then we also have Tom DeFanti, who is the research scientist with Cal IT2 at UCSD. Our panel outline for today, we're going to ask John to provide an overview of the pilot testbed efforts, and then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into two of the working groups and hear some perspectives from our steering committee representatives. John?
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Jen. Apologize for that. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage here a little bit. So I've been essentially kind of flywheeling a couple of the teams. So the way we're going to do this today is to talk a little bit about just what the purpose of the pilot is and sort of why we're here. Really, the key point for me is to the fact that we're really trying to take the successful model of the original West Coast team in PRP and try to extend that model beyond the original footprint. It's important that we begin to look at these services as ones that are fairly ubiquitous, and that we can spread the capabilities across a national footprint as best we can. We want to be able to take and describe and figure out what some of the scaling issues are, some of the issues that need addressing, operationalizing, scaling, et cetera. And I think Larry pointed it out earlier too, there's going to be a couple of sessions later today and tomorrow that are going to address scaling issues at the campus and at the national level. So be sure to be part of those. We want to keep the focus of this effort on scaling the science. Besides the technical bits that that we're all very familiar with in terms of how to take the capabilities we have technically and scale them out, we really want to focus on the engagement piece. And we know that there's a challenge. There was some mentions on the last panel about things like ACI Ref and the Campus Champions. And so if I was at the PERC meeting a couple of weeks ago, and there's a huge amount of enthusiasm from that community. And I think one of the things that we want to be able to do here is to really leverage some of that, that enthusiasm, and try to take that momentum into the efforts that we're doing here within the pilot. Okay. So here's the partners. The team came together at the Internet2 Global Summit meeting last year, and the group was convened by Larry and Howard Pfeffer, the Internet2 CEO. The focus here is on getting some of the regional partners deeply engaged. So allowing them in turn to engage the campuses in their footprint in the process. And then also to really look at developing a cohesive set of national scale services so we can support the science in a more end-to-end collaborative sort of approach. All these folks here have been engaged in both the engagement team, the steering team, and the technical team, which we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes. So this is the map that Larry showed, and just a couple of things to point out here. The original team and the extended team are essentially covering a larger footprint and are going to be part of the way we kind of scale this thing out. Turn this machine here. Okay. Okay. So apologize for the kind of struggles here. So when we started in May, we developed a target set of goals for the team, and then some stretch goals to give us some initial direction beyond our initial sprint. James is going to come up in a couple of minutes and talk about how we did against these targets. I think the overarching aspect of what we are trying to achieve here is to really develop this idea of the human network. There's been already a couple of discussions about the relationship building that pervades the ability to support the science with the technology, and that's a really key aspect of that. So I think that we're trying to keep that very much in mind as we move forward here. And then, oops. So that leaves you a couple of points about the steering team. That group with participants from each of the member organizations has been providing some guidance to both the tech and the engagement teams on the strategies in these 4 areas that are shown here. So the key aspect of the steering team effort is to help us find the right partnerships. So for example, in the facilitation and integration areas here that we're talking about is actually focused on making the infrastructure useful and important to the science collaborations by building the right partnerships on the science side. And then the sustainability and the scalability address how we build and grow the infrastructure with the right technology partners. So with that, I'll turn it over to James.
All right. Hopefully I can move. All right, it's moving. Okay, can you all hear me? So I think I'm going to compress this a little bit since we're before lunch, but I wanted to get a little bit of background on the technical team. John mentioned that we had some near-term and stretch goals. This turned into like a 6-page document, right? And so the stretch was a lot of stretch, right? And so I think that was the most important thing that we tackled was really identifying the fact that we only had a short period of time, a very distributed set of folks. And so we really came down to wanting to make sure we addressed some low-hanging fruit, get some grid FTP tests in place. And what you can see here is a snapshot of the state of the grid FTP dashboard. You can see the list of names on here. There's also some, I don't know if you say it SIDAS, Jim, are you in here? SIDAS, is that the correct way to pronounce that? There's some of those on here as well, but you can see the test bid site. So we each agreed to provide 2 test participants from our regions. And so you can see from GPN, you have Nebraska and Missouri on here. We also have a couple sites from, I guess, one site from NiserNet and Internet 2, interestingly. They actually provided systems that fully participated within the PRP Kubernetes cluster. So those are fully inherited into that device, and I like to know that one of them actually has a GPN sticker on it. So it's been a very collaborative activity with Internet 2 and all the participants on this. The measurement archive, everything is fully deployed completely in that PRP Kubernetes cluster, which has been really eye-opening and making it very exciting to the technical folks. The engagement that's referenced on here that occurs weekly, these folks are learning something each time they make the call, and it's really helped some of these folks that are on the campuses really stay engaged and build some of that community. One of the things that's on here, tool development and implementation. One of the exciting things, I think Internet 2 came up with this idea, and Mark Feit at Internet 2 is implementing it, is this idea of, dashboards are hard to maintain. And so one of the things that's going to come out of this going forward is how can we actually shoot out and create a series of tests along the path of the science data movement. And so some really exciting things happening with that we hope to follow up on. As we were just, 2 weeks ago, I think Grid FTP plugin was released that has made a lot of this much, much easier. So we hope to see, additional participants and be able to reflect a better representation on that mesh. And then finally, one of the real exciting things is a number of the regional networks all use very similar software. GlobalNoc, for instance, provides metric collection software that all has a common API. And so one of the things that a subset of us are doing are talking amongst each other to make that available so that not only do we have perf sonar from an NRP perspective, showing what can be done, but we have the underlying metrics of the network. And so right now, I could go into the GPN portal and be able to show end-to-end what's happening at Brown University, across Internet 2, to GPN, down into Arkansas, down to University of Arkansas. And that's across 4 different domains, and all that data is available because we're partnering. And so that's one of the exciting things that falls into that stretch goals that we want to follow up on. So I want to go into the engagement team, which is the thing that is very hard, right? Building that human network and that process of engagement has been very tough. But luckily, we've got a lot of great examples out there. I want to start by showing a quick example of one of the things that has come out of our discussions, which is how do we find out who to talk to on the campuses to find out that they could benefit from engagement. And so within our community, we started the idea of, well, we've got all sorts of open sources of data. See this really pretty orb here? You can't tell anything from it, right? But if you go through this, again, I'm going to fly through here, but basically we're taking all the NSF and NIH awards over time. This particular graph shows just the social network among PIs and co-PIs across, in this case, it's Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and South Dakota, which are the full GPN state membership. And this is over just the past 4 years, and it's interinstitutional. There's not much you can tell at this stage, but the color of the dots show that it's a different state that they're collaborating with. The thickness of the lines shows the number of awards that are going between 2 PIs. And one of the exciting things is as you look at these graphs and zoom in and out of the graphs, you can really make some interesting discoveries and find out like the nexus of collaboration on a campus and help use that information to engage with the campus champions and other groups to find out if there's some needs. So, for instance, I don't know how well it shows up there, but this was an interesting one. This is if you zoom in, on this graph here. I don't know if you can see my pointer. No. There's interesting relationships that you see, and in this case, I found there's a PI that's been on 3 different clusters. You can see him on the right here. Unfortunately, I don't have a pointer. But you can see this graph automatically lets you jump straight to the NSF awards and see if those are big data movement ones. And then you can find out if they're the key people that you want to bring into your social network, your real social network, and have them help engage others on the campus. And so it's been exciting because this is something that we can take and use to engage with the campus champions. I think it's been fantastic that we've seen across Oklahoma with Winoki. These types of interactions are invaluable to building that human network. And so we're taking this aspect and trying to use that to help feed our processes. One of the things I did want to point out was this whole social network graph analysis and the pulling into the NSF and NIH data is fully deployed on the PRP Kubernetes as a set of containers. So I'll fly through some of this other information. One of the other things that we've been spending time on, and some of you in this room probably saw call-outs or requests for information from members of our team up here, but we've asked for information like Larry showed this morning. The SDSC data that he shared was very powerful in helping us figure out where resources are being used, who in our community is using them, and kind of close that gap to finding out if there's an issue. In fact, it's funny, Dan was just mentioning the research with CAPS that happens at Tech, the spring forecasts and such, and it's a very successful program. We actually, somewhat related to this, found a researcher that was upset that their 5 megabit flow went to 2.5 megabits. I was like, that was shameful in the first place, but it went down to 2.5 megabits. Well, the fact that we were able to have that interchange, we found out that was occurring, and found out that there was a VM configuration on NOAA that was coming across N-Wave, coming across back to Internet 2. And those conversations wouldn't have happened if we didn't have the right campus champions sitting on that campus and the right engagement regionally. And I think this NRP effort is helping a lot of that happen. So it's been exciting to see from an engagement perspective, we're having some great successes. By the way, so they had made their cron job pull the data down starting at like 2 a.m. so they could have it ready at 8 a.m. Now they can pull it in at 8 a.m. and it's ready at 8:02 a.m. So it's great. Other piece, I think this is listed wrong. I think it should probably say nearly 500 instead of nearly 480. I think it's over 480 campus champions, over 260. So over 260 institutions. One of the exciting things is I know that many of us are starting to embrace that information and use that for our engagement. And I think there's not enough of that. I think, I don't know, Internet 2 is doing some of that. We were talking in a panel, and it's happening at each of our campuses. And the final thing I wanted to say on the engagement is it's time to get the facilitation and engagement a topic of interest at our networking events. A couple of these are listed, PERC, not necessarily a networking event, but we need to have the network folks really get involved in that. We have, let me just jump ahead here. I really, I stood up here and I was like, we've got 18 minutes left and 6 more people, right?
It's okay.
So I'll just jump into a small brief thing about the region at GPN because I think it's pretty fantastic because it's only possible because of the state networks that make it happen. And so here's this is a diagram that is built by the 6 state R&E networks and the member institutions across the region. They're constantly evolving. You can see a line here showing that we're excited because South Dakota is getting ready to upgrade to 100 gig in the next couple of weeks, next month or so. But the great thing is we have been able to, based on these initiatives that started last year, we've actually deployed over a dozen Fiona nodes across the region. We're ready to have 2 of them participate in this test bid. It's been exciting. And the key thing is those weekly engagements. We're building this community. I think I referred to it as Zooming with regularity. I mean, you get in a Zoom session. It's a model that we had been using with in Oklahoma with ONEOKI, the One Oklahoma Cyber Infrastructure Initiative that I saw that PRP uses. In every case where I see that happening with regularity, good things result. I was talking with somebody earlier. Sometimes you may not even have a full agenda, but the act of making that regular activity, you're going to share some great ideas and have some good things happen. So I wanted to call out specifically, the state network, in Oklahoma, OneNet is very well integrated into that state initiative, ONEOKI. I know MoreNet is very integrated with Show Me CI, CanShare, CanRen's involved. These are great state initiatives that are building that more localized engagement process. And so within the engagement team, we've been talking about the stress of using those folks. And so with that, because I don't want to take up too much lunch, I'll just hand off. Who's next?
So as we move, you started us moving into our different perspectives from our steering committee members and regional networks, working with our member institutions. Lewis Fox is going to be next to talk about CNET.
And by the way, I apologize for flying through that. If you've got any questions, if you can't tell, I'm a little passionate about some of this, feel free to grab me anytime during this workshop.
I'll just do this from here so we can move along. I'm just going to talk about 5 facets that define how CNEC has been involved in the Pacific Research Platform. First is by providing, obviously, a custom network environment. We have various network layers in the CalRen network, and one of them is specifically for high-performance research. And we have been piloting various abstractions for selectively announcing routes for data-intensive science DMZ resources. As a part of the incremental pilot, we've also established bilateral BGP peering over what we're calling super channels, provisioned over Pacific Wave to Starlight in Chicago. We have set up our BGP policies to announce and accept a relatively small subset of routes. This provides a more efficient path for data movement and workflows between and among California researchers and their colleagues. As another milestone in the pilot, we're beginning to implement BGP community tagging of routes, prefixes covering data-intensive science DMZ routes. So in a very deep engagement at the network level. Community engagement has been another aspect of our work. We have historically had a high-performance research technical advisory committee but we have now lead or organize the weekly PRP calls, which have been extremely important to the community. And it's always amazing to me to occasionally sit in on those calls, to have 50, 75 or more of some of the busiest people, network engineers and scientists involved on these calls. Engineering support and research engagement. We directly contribute staff to the Pacific Research Platform effort. And this includes advanced BGP policy design and implementation, traffic engineering, network analysis and troubleshooting, and developing regional and broader scope testbed environments. Workshops and engagements. We began with our annual conference to have PRP workshops, and have continued to do that and to support workshops both domestically and abroad. We've worked closely with Steve Hooter, who's here, and his group from the University of Oregon to set up a PRP effort, for instance, at the University of Guam. And this, by the way, has been fabulous for our engineers. I highly recommend it I mean, it seems like you have these valuable people, and that they should get on a plane and go abroad and be gone for, perhaps a week. They're sort of, in a way, reborn and come back with all kinds of energy and ideas, and a sort of understanding of their own capacity and the value that it has to a much broader community. So it's been something very, very important. And lastly, advocacy. We have worked very closely with regional, national, and international groups to take to distill and take some of the best ideas that have come out of PRP from a regional network perspective and work with our colleagues.
Thank you, Louis. Wendy?
What led to Kimber's involvement in the NRP really stemmed from this idea of a data DNC concept that came from the NSF-funded DIBS VDC project that Manish spoke about in his opening talk. It's a collaboration between Rutgers, Penn State, NGA Edge, and Kimber, and it gave us an idea of sort of what we could do if we collaborated in the region. That led to this idea of a broader collaboration in the Northeast and the formation of an informal collaboration, which we call the Eastern Regional Network. The first discussion for ERN was actually at last year's NRP meeting because a number of us were here, and it was a great opportunity to talk to each other. What we're doing is we're using the technology as a mechanism for putting together, I like to quote Larry Smarr on this, a coalition of the willing in the region to really enhance support for research with a focus on research engagement, end-to-end performance, and support for data movement, and trying to understand what we can put together as a platform for that. The other thing that we're trying to do, and given the density in the Northeast of some of the smaller colleges and universities, we're really trying to reduce the barriers for some of the under-resourced colleges and universities to participate in these activities. And there's actually a panel later on this afternoon that's going to talk about the smaller colleges and under-resourced universities trying to participate in these activities. So we're trying to encourage adopting some of the technologies, identifying science drivers and collaborations within their regions, bringing some of the things that James talked about, identifying those collaborations, and not just at the Research One universities, but at some of these other organizations. And then also getting some of these smaller organizations to understand how to incorporate these ideas into their actual strategic plans and missions. What I put up on baby pictures are always good. So one of the things that we have done is use this idea of the mad dash to sort of highlight the collaboration. So the three that you see up there, and as you can tell, the performance isn't all that great. One is from the actual DIBS project and shows the collaboration from the organizations that are participating. The second one is actually for the PenRen network, which is the Pennsylvania infrastructure, and those sites were actually funded through CC Star regional grant that we had, and includes smaller colleges and universities. And the third is what we've started to spin up as part of the ERN, and again, just trying to get people to adopt these technologies, whether it's Persona or Fiona, and actually collaborate in a visual way so that then we can focus on actually doing some of that end-to-end performance tuning.
Thank you, Wendy. Akbar? And no slides here. So we're moving to the no slides portion of the...
Okay, so Texans are heavily invested in sciences and research. It's not just in the HPC realm, but also in many other disciplines, basic science research, health sciences being one of the focus areas with the major medical center down in Houston. Because we have such a large coast, we have a lot of weather-related and coastal sciences that are being conducted. And so to that end, having learned connect to a NRP fabric, it was a next logical thing for us to do. I'm going to move away from bits and bytes, and we'll come back to it, but I want to talk about the softer side of things. As we talk about engagement teams, one critical component of that team is how effectively you communicate. And I picked up a book from Alan Alda recently. The title is, "If I Understood You, Would I Have This Look on My Face?" I highly encourage you to pick that one up. It's about communicating effectively, have empathy as you're communicating, and awakening a better communicator that's already inside each one of us. So that book must be a must-read for everybody who is engaging with scientists, and some of us sitting on this table, we're engaging with people who give us money to make this happen. So if you're not communicating that vision, then are you really getting the message across? Human networking was covered already, so I'm going to leave that one on the side. But I do want to talk about a critical component of success of this program or this pilot would be the cyber infrastructure engineers. And I don't know how many programs are out there that are producing the type of talent that you can take and put in this environment and help the engagement or help the science happen. So I think what's needed is the organizations that are operators of networks, they need to cultivate cyber infrastructure engineers and train them as they come out of the skills that they have with computer science and networking skills. And so there's an example of what Learn is doing. We had an intern, which was a graduate student from University of Houston, worked under Denise Gherkin's lab, worked on SDN, worked on network function virtualization, and we hired him as a cyber infrastructure engineer. And we did that very creatively. This was done in the mid-cycle budget cycle, and we worked with one of our HPC campuses, UT Dallas, and helped them provide a cyber infrastructure resource that could partially work for a regional network as well as providing help to HPC and campus environment. So that was a really good success story that I wanted to share, and I think we need to do that more and do it often. Lastly, I want to talk about workshops, working with Dan Stanzione at TAC and Nathaniel Learn, and we're going to put together some workshops to educate the Texas community on the resources that are available and how to do science engagement and do it well. And finally, I want to put in a plug, not only for Alan Alda, but also for Learn. We are in the middle of deploying a Pacific Wave fabric that goes right through Texas into Oklahoma, Kansas, and up to Starlight. This is a 100 gig facility that extends the Pacific Wave and WRN further east. And so that facility is going to be helpful in attaining some of the goals that this pilot has. And Dallas is a major hub for a lot of the members that I have, but it also is a major hub for some of our regional partners that are part of some type of connection in Dallas. So my board was gracious enough to provide some funding for us to stand up a distributed layer 2 exchange with the intent of facilitating more collaboration among not only the Texans, but also our neighbors. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
So I'll try to make this quick, and I'm going to focus more on what I think we've learned from the pilot process so far, and more from a technical aspect because that's what I do. But the first thing I would say is the infrastructure that we're working with is not trivial. There's been a tremendous amount of effort put into it, and there's more needed. But since we're building on the work that folks have already done at PRP, we have a huge leg up. I think if we were trying to start this from scratch, we would need years. As it is, we're able to turn up meaningful infrastructure in weeks or months, and I think that's an absolutely enormous boost that can't be underestimated. I think we've also observed that PRP has evolved into the design that it has right now, what we've been loosely calling PRP v2. And if we are starting from scratch, as we are, we might make slightly different choices. So that's something that we're trying to figure out as part of the pilot process, how we can optimize what the capabilities and the restrictions of the infrastructure within our environment. Of course, in order to do that, we need to know what resources we have to make available. So we're very excited about making those resources available to NYSERNet's members, especially the smaller institutions who, for whatever reason, have not been able to take advantage of the traditional HPC resources that are out there. We have to get to the point where we're piloting with researchers. And so that's going to be our next drive. And in support of that, we are already working with Stony Brook University and with the American Museum of Natural History. So we're going to have a university that's connected to our network at 100 gigabits per second and one that is just connecting on the basis of a CC Star grant. Both of them obviously have research going on. They both have big data needs, data transfer, analysis. They're going to be taking advantage of the resource in completely different ways, but I think we'll also find that there'll be strong similarities between them. And so that's what we're looking to learn from. And I just want to point out that we have brought somebody on, Jim Kirianis, who's sitting over there, who up until recently was at New York University. He started at NYSERNet on Friday and is at this meeting as his first NYSERNet activity. And he's actually going to be taking the lead on our NRP efforts. So I'll be continuing to participate in the project, but he's going to be the person who's going to be driving it from here on out.
That's great. All right. Welcome for your second day on the job. This was great. Thank you, Bill. Tom, very fitting that you were the tail end of our panel here to help summarize the views so far and the work that's been done.
Okay, I agree with all of you. Having been completely obsessed with the form of this event and the one that preceded it, and having delegated all my dreams, I don't have any content to present. But I do want to make sure that you don't leave until Sherilyn tells us what the deep dives are about and where they are, because they're a really important thing. Get your lunch and then go get into smaller group discussions. And so I'm turning it back to you.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Okay. All right, very good. I know that we started behind, but I would like to take an opportunity for at least one question for the panel. Is there anyone that would like to start off the discussion? All right, Ron. So if to repeat, Ron asked a question of what's missing.
So I'll take a stab at it. Additional funding. I mean, a lot of us, I mean, you see up here, a lot of us are doing it leveraging, you know, other projects that we're having. So in Pennsylvania, we got a number of the CC STAR grants. So those were equipment grants that put the cyber infrastructure into the campus infrastructure. So we're working on that momentum. But there's just a lot of things that we could do, and it's really hard to fit it in with all the other things that you have to do. And I'll talk about it from a regional networking perspective, that a lot of us just have to do the regular running of the network, which is really sort of the lifeblood for our organizations. And supporting a solid networking environment allows our schools to take advantage of some of these other opportunities, and trying to find the right balance between those without some additional funding can be challenging.
I'll take a crack at that too. You know, I think the one thing for us, and we're going to address it sooner than later, is pushing out some of the advances to a broader community beyond the research community, to our community colleges, to libraries, to K-12 schools, in terms of network performance and visibility, and trying to get a relatively inexpensive tool set out there. But that will also require us to look at the human side and the you know, and thinking about workshops and so on. And it's not something that we have historically done much of. The other thing is, you know, we're looking at a network. We're in and out of the network now monthly. We're moving about 80 petabytes of data on the CalREN network, and it's sort of Inder and I talk about this. And the next iteration of these networks is going to be very expensive. And we're going to have to figure this out collectively because no single one of our networks can do this. And we're going to have to figure out new ways of sharing resources and sharing talents and sharing software development and all these things, because you know, it's hard to imagine that 80 petabytes is the tip of the iceberg, but I really believe it is, based on what we heard today. And if we're successful in engaging smaller institutions and the like, you know, those numbers are only going to increase. And we've seen them double from last year, from 40 petabytes a month to 80. So, you know, what's on the horizon?
I'm not going to say funding, it's been said a couple times already, but I think the community, you know, it's like there's certain connections between these communities that we can still gain by building those connections. That's one of the exciting things that we've had occur in this process, is seeing those small gaps, that if we could make those connections, it actually inspires some extra time and effort that comes from those new members of the community. It's been inspiring to see certain engineers within the GPN region that kind of embrace this. The next thing you know, they're slacking to you at Sunday morning at 2 a.m. And it's great. I mean, these are people that are, it's building that community. It's kind of making up for the lack of resources elsewhere. And so you got to kind of ride that high for a bit. And that's one of the things that's been really inspirational in our area.
And I think just to add to that a little bit, I think it's really important. It's been mentioned before, but you know, organizations that revolve around this PERC meeting, right, with the campus champions, et cetera. I mean, it's really important to get those folks engaged and have that interaction. So we're really hoping, like at the upcoming TechX, right, that we'll have some people from that community to participate, and similarly, you know, find some cross-pollination between the folks that are traditionally in the network area, you know, being a little bit more focused on facilitation, cyber infrastructure engineering, et cetera, that kind of stuff. So,
thank you. All right, so I think in summary, in answer to your question, Ron, it's we've got the coalition of the willing with some resources behind it that are going to be necessary to help scale this. Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank our panelists very much for their insights and their work on the pilot testbed so far. And I'm very relieved to hear that Sherilyn's giving instructions for the deep dive, because it occurred to me sitting up here that I might have to do that, and I don't have them. So if Sherilyn is here, that is great. Thank you.